Good morning. Yes, let me start immediately with the two slides where I would like to introduce with you the two philosophies of Unstudio and UNSense, because UNSense is a new company. We set it up next to, as Marta already introduced, next to Unstudio. Because we believe that technology is bringing a fantastic new opportunity for architects to build a more healthier environment. And Unstudio, I will not go too much into it, but of course exists for 30 years, and we do highly diverse work from architecture, urban planning, even product design, etc. But the topic for me today is talking about the future of cities. So how can we improve the quality of cities within the next coming years, especially when we have to deal with so many topics around sustainability, climate adaptation, health, mobility, what will be improved or have to be improved when we grow in our inner cities, and thirdly, technology. So, like I said, if we grow over the next coming decade with more than a population of 68% in the world, where this population will go to more to the inner cities, then how do we make these communities more resilient, livable, and accessible? One of the late topics we have worked on is the topic of health. Related to not so much physical health alone and how we eat or how we exercise, but more how health could be connected to the built environment. As we know, in the history of architecture, there were always architects interested in how health could be connected to the way how we organize the city, making cities, for instance, more healthier, in communities, but today we have technology and can support us to improve healthier, to make cities more healthier. But here you see an image of the way how we refer to food and the way how we can rethink physical health, but I will talk about it later. What we can do actually with architecture and health is that we can make architecture more active, in the sense that it's called active design, that we let people more walk in the built environment. We lately hide even sometimes our elevators in buildings, so that people will take, if the stair of course is attractive, that they will take the staircase. And we have learned that if you use these architectural qualities, like using more staircases, more places where people could meet each other much better, then that creates an enormous amount of social interaction as well. So, talking about social interaction and the way how we organize our cities, we believe we are talking here now about a university campus in Singapore, but if we look at user groups within the city or in a campus structure like this one, we believe that it is so important to know how and where user groups are coming from, what kind of infrastructure they use, where and how do they make pauses, how do they use the city in the day's time or in the week's time. So we call it lately clockwise planning of the way how you guide people to the right location. And maybe we do this because we look at areas who are too monofunctional, or parts who need to be built new in the city, whereby we say we don't want to make these monofunctional qualities in the city anymore, but what we do with the data we collect, that we look at the way how we can make interactions between different programs within a site, so that in the morning, the afternoon, and even in the evening, late in the evening, people can meet and see each other, so to make a location much more lively. But here in this campus project, of this university project, we didn't scatter the faculties over the different buildings, but what we did was to introduce in one building 4 faculties, from product design to urban design, architecture, in a vertical way, so that on the hallways, horizontally, every professor from every faculty would always meet, the students would meet, visitors would meet. So in order to not only make a lively environment, on the one hand, you could say, but on the other hand, also to make an environment that stimulates and cross-virtualizes knowledge. By the way, how all these different departments then also hopefully start to work much more with each other. But this example, this way of planning, and planning even programs within the building, we have applied now to also urban planning within cities. And then, of course, make these organizational qualities attractive. So with a lot of green, a lot of nice open air conditions, daylight, to guide the movement of people going through these areas. But talking about density, and density we have to deal with everywhere at the moment, especially in the cities, what we've noticed in not only Europe, but in many parts of the world. But for instance, in Holland, we have to, in certain cities, we have to raise over 1 million houses over the next 7 to 8 years, 1 million houses. So that's an incredible amount of density we have to introduce in not only the inner cities, of course, but also on the edges of the city. That increases close to 30% of traffic around these densities with these cities. And that's why we need to rethink of how we make these cities, and also rethink mobility and innovate on the level of mobility. And that's my second topic for today. How can we rethink mobility and think about the future of how we can guide mobility? This is a project we designed for the ring of Amsterdam, whereby with the prediction we already foresee that over the next 10 years we will drive much more electric. Probably synchronic driving will be the future. With that we can reduce the profile of the ring, of the ring road around Amsterdam, and with that we introduced hubs where you can park, what you can see in the middle of that image, where you can park with your electric car and then not go with your car into the city center, but you could park there, you could plug into an electric system, and even with this building we believe that if you park with more than a few thousand cars in this building, that you could even generate energy for the context of this neighborhood. And of course it's not only a parking building, it is also connecting itself to different programs. And from there you can take a city pod and move from there, or you can take a bike and move to the city center of Amsterdam. And this is a real serious discussion in Amsterdam. And we know it from other cities like Oslo. In Oslo they're going to, by 2025, they're going to drive electric in the city center, and the city center is going to be totally freed of cars in the future. Amsterdam is having seriously that discussion too. There is already, since we have developed this plan now 2 years ago, we have already discussions with the city about these hubs we're going to build in the city. And that generates a profile of this ring road, what is comparable to a boulevard as we know them from Paris. I mean, now we don't like to live around the ring roads in Amsterdam because they make noise, etc. But if we have electric cars driving there, then the noise will be softer. We have then the opportunity to have there then the prediction of a possible 7,000 units of houses we can introduce then around the ring, where you then can live. And that's where the city is looking for. Particularly, so I'm always saying to everyone who is interested in investing in the city of Amsterdam, go and invest in areas around the ring, because there you can densify. And as I said, it is difficult to find areas in a city like Amsterdam, but it's having such an important UNESCO-protected historical quality to densify. So talking about mobility and the future of living, we have been involved in many projects over the last years to connect ourselves towards in order to find out if they are interesting enough to connect ourselves to when it comes down to the future of living in cities. Like we know everything about right now the Hyperloop, but as we know that also the Hyperloop patents are freed up, so everyone can work now with this system. We have a fantastic group of people in Delft working on the Hyperloop in Holland. And this is a proposal what we developed with them to make a series of Hyperloop connections in Europe where you could actually really heavily compete with flying because from Amsterdam, taking in a Hyperloop towards Frankfurt is only 50 minutes in its time. You have to go there and when you fly then it's more or less an hour, so it's actually 10 minutes earlier, and you are there from door to door. And then what we did was to think about these new type of stations around the Hyperloop, so that you would not have a traditional station anymore, but a transit hub, comparable to the hubs I talked about before, whereby you can step over one mobility system to the next, and that you have a lot of programs connected to it. These different modalities. And as I promised, I talked early on about food, but you might think, what is food to do with architecture? But it's lately a hot topic, especially we noticed that in the north of Europe, where people are angry, quite angry, that so much food is traveling before it comes on your plate. In Holland, I mean, most of the food we get on our plate is or needs to travel close to 33,000 kilometers before you have it on your plate. And that's crazy, because the Netherlands is the second largest food exporter in the world. It walks into the forefront player in innovation and food production and focuses itself on sustainable innovation. So how is it that we, for that reason, can't produce that food for our own local entities? Whereas there is so much innovation going around, from working with drones to robots, LED farming, etc. So how could we rethink this whole model? And this was a question from a group of farmers in the north of Holland, connecting themselves towards a group of investors who were asking us, can you rethink in the way how we could work much more together? So what kind of production techniques do we need to use to collaborate better and to make the food we produce more for local use? And there are many new techniques, as we know. You could today, with geomapping, you could not farm anymore in a quite linear way, but you can, with the quality of the earth you can decide on which part of each fertile ground you'd like to grow what. There are new systems in the way you can automate your machines instead of using the manual operational former machines. And as we know, a lot of farmers have the difficulty there to transform because they don't have the business models of how to transform their farms into an integral new system. Also, farming for inner cities is a whole new discussion. We are talking to a lot of Japanese companies right now who help us think in the way how in vertical buildings we could introduce LED farming in order to connect itself towards startup farms, etc. So would it then not be great to make an integral farm whereby a research center, a museum, where you educate people about the future of farming, as good as we do it in the region of Holland. And that the production of food, even restaurants and a market, could be part of this whole new farm. And how could we, from a regional farming strategy, bring that also to the local people in the region, not alone, but also in the city center, whereby, there you could work with food startups, a market, and also showing how this new production of food is celebrated. So, and here you see an example of how such a farm could look like on the edge of Amsterdam. It's called the Haarlemmermeer, whereby this museum, a marketplace, restaurants and everything could be combined with a visiting center and actually also connect itself towards the real production of food. And then, of course, bringing it to the city center. This is the hub I showed you before, but then transformed in a vertical farm, whereby all these activities, as I mentioned, could be even connected towards the electric car, giving electricity to the vertical farming and all kinds of other programs to be connected towards the ring road of Amsterdam, with the new housing units around it. So that took me a while. Gosh, I have to be careful. I have another 5 minutes. UNSense is this company whereby all these things I showed you before is promoting the idea of how, with this architect company, we innovate with new technology. And of course, think about how we can humanize the built environment. And we go a little bit against the smart city concept. Because if you would ask any city what the smart city concept exactly means, then nobody knows. Nobody exactly knows where we talk about when we talk about smart cities and smart buildings. So what we say, we need to direct smart city concepts towards the good things of what we can do in cities, like the topics I mentioned, sustainability, food, circularity, etc. So the argument we have is why can we find in a car, in our iPhone age, so many, why are there so many beautiful sensors and can do so many things, whereas in the built environment we believe that we are still in the Walkman phase. And of course, how can we change that? How can we rethink this model in the way how we build our built environment? This is a project we're doing in Helmond. It is a highly experimental project where we use all these new technologies. It's a project for close to 1,500 housing units, even a business park, so entrepreneurs can be part of this area. It's in the south of Holland, Helmond. It's close to Eindhoven, where you have also Philips, even Tesla is having a factory there. There are many startup companies around this area. And the neighborhood of this small city, close to Eindhoven, recognizes that the people who work in this neighborhood need to have another type of housing units and an environment where they want to live in than, let's say, the traditional housing areas as we know it. So what we did was to look at the way how the houses or the area could be connected to the way how the farmland is organized. So we use these zones of the agricultural history before into the planning of the way how these houses are organized on that land. We have their living, working, sharing communities and programs, a lot of integral landscape and a lot of urban green. And we have even the possibilities there that people can produce their own food. And you have to imagine, although this might look a project where you would not see so much technology, but there is a lot of technology involved. You can here have your individual garden, but the most interesting is you can have also a shared garden with 3 or 4 neighbors in the community and then produce your own food. But with the technology we are introducing here, you need to also know who's going to work on this in this garden and who's going to support it. So we create a lot of technology there in communication strategies that people also support each other in doing things with each other, so that you really get a very good binding strategy of how people share knowledge with each other. So this productive landscape and the way how we deal with water, for instance, when it rains in Holland, I mean, you know, it rains a lot in Holland, people mostly are often not so happy, but here people will be happy when it rains because the water is going to be all recycled and reused for their own community. So from energy use, the energy transition strategies we introduce here, water recycling and food production is all going to be part of this new strategy of how we develop these housing projects. And the most important is this data universe, what we set underneath a project. And we start with a 100 houses project, whereby we use a data platform, and it's organized in 3 layers. So you have a physical layer, the built environment, and then you have the data layer and the value layer, and that is the way how we deal with services in this neighborhood. And people here can decide if they want to be part of this this community or not. But what is the most interesting is that here we are able to protect the data. We have done a feasibility study already for 2 years, whereby we now are so far that we know that we can, and we had even cyber specialists involved in this whole study, that we can protect the data and that the data could stay within the community. But the most important that the users are part of this whole project. So we have endless discussions with the residents for this neighborhood, who are highly enthusiastic about the idea of having a community what is lively, what supports the positive things of our future in the cities. But the essence is that they also support technology to support the good things of circularity, what I mentioned, sustainable environments, and all the things I mentioned before. Yeah, so I leave it here, and later I can come back to possible questions. Thanks.